Oh, yeah. I think most of you know the nature of this evening class. It is a class that, continuation that we have started, some of us started more than 2 years ago. And it is almost at the end of the reading this amazing text. So I really hope end of this present program, that means end of March, that means we have 8 Wednesday evenings, and hopefully we'll see the end of this, reading this book. And so people who are, the first time joining this class, I will just say a few words, the structure of the class, because the class is deliberately designed, to not just read the text here and there, but read the text quite thoroughly. And in Tibetan, in fact, all the words and lines without missing anything, part of the oral transmission that we started 2 years ago. So because of the class is designed in that nature, there are a few, the recitations need to be said, lineage prayer, of course then also the refuge and bodhicitta, which we always do that every evening when we have class. Refuge and bodhicitta lines are said all the time. Then also me reading the text in Tibetan as a part of the oral transmission, the oral transmission. So those are some kind of structure that you need to be aware of. And tonight, mainly I will focus on, not necessarily reading the text itself, but just pointed out a few areas that where we are reading, to recall some of the important points, connection to the section that we are reading, that we have already read our last program, to bring, to refresh our memory. In that way, we might be able to, not just you, but also myself, because now almost 3-4 months we haven't read the text, so my memory is completely rusted. Even I struggle to find where we stopped last year October. So tonight mainly I'm going to focus on really to share with you some of the important points at the section that we are reading, and then next Wednesday then we will continue reading the text itself. So these are just some points to say before we start the actual session, and it will last until say 8:45 or 8:30. We'll see according to our energy, so that is the duration time. As we know, our this kind of gathering, to be helpful and to be useful or not, it is very much heavily dependent on our intention being here and to participate the activities. Therefore, having a right intention or motivation is very, very crucial, important. When I say right intention, or I'm not necessarily prescribing a particular intention, saying that is right, you should listen or participate with that intention. I'm not going to say that. That is not the right way to do that. I always feel, and I've said many times, we all have the ability to experience many layers of positive minds, thoughts, and emotions, regardless of our different backgrounds. Whether we have a spiritual background or whether we don't have any religious background. Basically, we humans mentally have that kind of capacity, that kind of ability to experience, the layers of positive thoughts. That can be very secular positive thoughts, or that can be, related to a particular religious, spiritual path. That is up to the individuals, but it is useful, helpful. Try all our best to, not just you, also myself, to join, to participate this evening gathering, meditation, recitation, listening to the talk, contemplation, and at the end, dedication, reading. To do these, to engage in these activities with a positive, a constructive thought. Then, of course, among these different layers of positive intention that we are able to experience, then like the people who have taken the teachings of the Buddha Dharma as your spiritual journey, then it is useful, helpful to try to set our intention according to the teachings of the Buddha, because that is your spiritual journey path you have chosen, and also the text that we are reading, is belongs to in that spiritual tradition. Therefore, from many different ways, that will be extremely helpful. Then, when you say, intention according to the teachings of the Buddha, then again, there are many different ways to set our intention according to the teachings of the Buddha. And the traditional way, and some of the positive way, and also some of the most sort of effective way is setting our mind, with the mind taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The Buddha as one's own teacher, mentor, his teaching Dharma as our spiritual journey, path to be applied in our daily lives, to be experienced, to be actualized, and his Sangha as our spiritual friends, supporters, while in the spiritual journey. And having that kind of mind, going, taking refuge in three jewels, with the minimum thinking, taking refuge in three jewels, minimum, to be myself, to be free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha, suffering, and the origins of suffering. Then if you are able to do a little bit further, then not just myself, but also try to include, the other living beings. My taking refuge in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha is not just myself be free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha, but also, like myself, all these other living beings who are, in that kind of similar situation. For that purpose, I'm taking refuge, taking Buddha as my teacher, his teachings as my journey, and his sanghas as my supporter. And having that mind, and then if we participate this evening gathering, and that will be very, very helpful. People who are already taken the teachings of the Buddha as one's own spiritual path. And then, of course, among us, some of us have chosen, within the teachings of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva and the teachings, sometimes technically use Mahayana teachings. If that is the case, then it will be ideal, it will be really, really nice to set our intention according to Bodhisattva and the teachings, Mahayana teachings. And that is, having this, the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta, the mind which not just, think, feel, concerns one's own well-beings, but also a mind which thinks, feels, concerns well-beings of all living creatures, And not only concerns or feel or things, but also, thinking, I will take, the initiative, I will take the responsibility to work, for the sake of living beings. So that kind of motivation or the intention, mind with that kind of, will be very, very helpful. So that is here just briefly to share with you, at the beginning of the gathering, all of us to set a positive, a constructive intention to participate in class. And with that, in the prayer book, page 27, refuge and bodhicitta lines. Sanje chöda tsoje chonam la chanjo pado dane japso che dagi chöshe jibe sonamanje dola penje sanje toba sho sanje chöda tsoje chonam la chanjo pado dane japso che dagi jinso jibe sonamanje dola penje sanje toba sho Sanje chöda tsoji chonam la chanjo bado dane jaso che dage jenso jibe tsonamaji dola penje sanje doba. Oh yeah. So that is the very important part of this evening gathering, setting a positive intention to join the class. Then the next is a brief silent meditation, and the purpose of this meditation is simply to enhance a calm, clear, and focused mind. Mind which has the qualities of stillness, stability, and the qualities of clarity. Stillness in the sense mind is able to stay with the one given object of the meditation, or the one given object or the event that your mind is focusing. That is the stillness, stability. And the second quality is the clarity. Clarity in the sense, while the mind is with the object of the meditation, it is fully alert, it is fully aware of the object of the meditation. In other words, full attention is paid on the object of the meditation. So these two mental qualities need to be enhanced in this kind of meditation, and that will be very, very helpful, not only during this session, but also in the long term. If we these two qualities, mental qualities, then our mind will be extremely, on the one hand, extremely flexible, and also extremely, clear and fully alert and fully, aware of the present, and that will be very, very helpful. So for that purpose, we are going to do a just short, about 6-7 minutes silent meditation. very big one. Oh yeah. So now this single page photocopy, lineage prayer, and as I mentioned earlier, this is part of the giving the oral transmission. So while we are reading the lineage prayer, people who like to imagine where the Buddha statue is, imagine the historical Buddha Gautama is present, not in a form of statue, but as a real person, with his all the great qualities, particularly his fully cultivated great compassion, loving kindness towards all living creatures, that includes us, and also his fully developed great wisdom. And then as here, from the Buddha up to the present, those great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, these, the lineage masters like the Nagarjuna, great Indian master Nagarjuna, Asanga, and also another great Indian master which is very important, the Buddhism, well establishing in Tibet, Atisha, and particularly related to the text that we are reading, this kind of text, Lam Rim, Gradual Path to Enlightenment, Atisha, and also the writer, Tsongkhapa, a great 14th century master, who wrote this amazing text. Then, some of those great present teachers, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So imagine, sometimes imagining is important, although the teachings of the Buddha, the practicing the teachings of the Buddha is not just in a form of, pure believing or just imagining, need rigorous, analysis, investigation, and thinking. But at a certain stage, a certain occasion, certain level, this kind of imagination also involved. And this is one of them, just strongly imagining the presence of the Buddha and all those great teachers here in front of us is very helpful. With that, the feeling of the presence of those great teachers, now we'll read the lineage prayers. Gele chere tube ko tayen dove rewa ko veson maile she ja che she se beto shai de zo oi de la que cha zen dai me de ba te ye se ji cho ja ze ba que ye ko na mai ne tai me she do te be nam ro wa me ba ma ja be ya la cha ze lo she do pa ba ra kai wa ja we yomo che gomba dze zam le je lo do to me che ne sa so mo na yo so tai be sha la dai cha ce shin dai che bo ni le ju pe sa mo tai wa jai je be la ma ma no yo so zo be ne de be dai be ze mai me ze la de me ze te je se de me kembe wan bo jan be ya kai je ke be zo je zong ga ba lo sa tai be sha la so wa de ngai wa lo sa ge de nye bo so zhen ge jia je ra de chu re so se so wa ju so ba me be de na ba ja we de so wa de ra jama so ra ke la tai we me ke sa ta ba de be jo ngo cho ze je be ta ke ze ba ye sen ze she nye nam la kuen cha ze. Oh yeah, thank you. Oh yeah. As I mentioned earlier, we are reading this text written by this great Tibetan teacher, Geshe 14th century great master, and he had written 18 volumes of texts, and most of them are very much focused on the Buddhist important topics, the Buddhist concept of the reality, and also how we should understand our nature of the minds, different layers of the mental states, and through that how to enhance the compassion, loving kindness, altruism, wisdom, some of those important topics, touched by some of those great Indian masters, including Buddha, the historical Buddha himself. So Geshe the 18 volumes of his writings are really very much focused on some of the most important topics in the teachings of the Buddha. Topics in the teachings of the Buddhas of the Sutrayana, topics of the teachings of the Buddha in the Vajrayana. Some of his writings are focused on some of those great Vajrayana practices, like the Samaja, Hiruka, Yamantaka, and some other practices. So this text that we are reading is, as I mentioned earlier, this great Indian master, the Atisha, Atisha, Dipamkara Atisha, was born in modern day Bengal, West Bengal, or a little bit in the Bangladesh, that area. Was born in that, and extremely dedicated to learn the teachings of the Buddha. And among the teachings of the Buddha, the Bodhisattva and the teachings, Atisha was very keen to find out the whole teachings of the cultivation of bodhicitta, the altruistic awakened mind. And that topic is very, whether we have that subject, cultivation of altruistic awakened mind, whether we have a spiritual commitment or spiritual journey or not, it is very important mental state to be nurtured within ourselves. And for Geshe, finding all the different what you call the teachers at his time to understand how to cultivate, how to nurture this mind, bodhicitta, altruistic awakened mind. And he even went all the way to modern days in Bali, not Bali, one of the Indonesia, the Borobudur, that area, and find out there was a great the teacher on that topic, on that subject. So this Geshe text is based on the structure. The structure is based on Atisha's text, wrote in Tibet. This great Indian master who came to Tibet around 11th century, and he wrote this text called the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, and not a very long text, but a very crucial text crucial in terms of the structuring the individual's spiritual journey. A person, he or she have decided to follow the teachings of the Buddha in general, and in particularly he or she decided to follow the among the teachings of the Buddha, Bodhisattva and the teachings, Bodhisattva and the teachings. To that sort of person, when he or she is fully sort of ready and fully sort of aware what he or she is doing, and when he or she wants to structure his or her spiritual journey, and that text is very useful. Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, Lamdun, Chanchu Lamdun. And not only Geshe use that text as a, the sort of how to structure his teachings, this type of teachings, but also other Tibetan Buddhist, the teachers, like in the Nyingma tradition, like in the Kagyu tradition, like in the Saitya tradition, many those great the Tibetan Buddhist masters, they use that the Atisha's text as a base how to lead their followers stage by stage, their spiritual journey. And therefore, I'm sure many of you know, the Tsongkhapa had written 3 different versions. Actually more than 3, but commonly we use 3 different versions. One is very extensive one, which is translated into 3 volumes into English, and it has 3 volumes. And this one is normally called Length Lam Rim, Gradual Path to Enlightenment. It also translated, but not very fully published. The book is not there, but there are several translations. So that, and what is useful, this kind of text? It is useful to a person or to a group of people who have done their, if I use that word, their homework. Homework in their spiritual journey. They have done, relatively good work. First of all, to understand the teachings of the Buddha, what Buddha taught, how he taught, and some of the most important topics. Really not just in a form of accepting, but through rigorous analysis, examinations, investigations, thinking. He or she had gone through that kind of processes. Then when he or she thought, okay, that is the spiritual path that I want to follow. Understand what Buddha taught. Of course, not completely, but get the sort of overall the teachings of the Buddha, like the Four Noble Truths, some of those basic important teachings. To that sort of person, then this kind of text is very, very useful. Because he or she already have the overall picture, overview in the general, the teachings of the Buddha. Now he or she is structuring that into his or her spiritual journey, stage by stage. So it is like the person who knows the building from top to bottom. Now he or she is trying to get into the top, following the steps. And that way it's very, very useful. If he or she hasn't done that kind of homework, if we immediately go this, then this will cause lots of confusions, lots of difficulties to understand. Particularly some of the topics, not that straightforward. So that is really something, not just the Westerners, but also we Tibetan have to know that. How as you know, the text is written for the monks who are already trained for years in the monasteries. He wrote this text, particularly this text is the later part of his life, to understand his followers who are following him wherever he goes. And he wrote to that sort of audience. Of course, he knows that in the future there are many people who will read that, but immediately, so that kind of things should be aware of that. Then when we read the individual topics, we will understand that. So that is one thing which I want to, and I'm sure I have raised this issue before, but this is the first evening in this program, and just to refresh that. There is something very useful. I found it's very, very useful to have some of these points. Then when we read individual topics, individual statements, yeah, of course, that is that statement, that topic is taught under this context. When we are able to contextualize the topics, then we will understand the whole essence of the text. And otherwise, if we take it just one particular topic, then take it that. This great Indian master, 7th century great Indian master, Dhammakirti, when he wrote his amazing 7 treatises on the Buddhist logic and epistemology, and one time he was talking about Buddhist, how the Buddhist logic is structured, and in that he said, you shouldn't take one piece of grain, then say all grains are like this. Taking one grains from then saying all grains are like this. If you start to do that, then you will have a trouble. So that is really upon very useful, because why I'm saying this, the text is, this text is, explaining many different topics, but it's explaining many different topics in a structure of stage by stage, step by step. And that's why it is called gradual path to, in Tibetan, Lam Rim, stages of the path to enlightenment, stages. So to understand why that stage, why this particular topic is taught in this particular stage, then we need to know the whole things. Otherwise, we'll have a problem, difficulty, to understand that. And that is important. Now, our topic, the section that we are reading, is the very much latter part of the text. So the text itself is generally divided into 3 sections called, the small scope, middling scope, and the great scope. The small scope in the sense of, the individual, the practitioner, he or she is, in the stage, mainly just, dealing either the, enhancement of the positive, also dealing some of those unhealthy mental state, is very much in the, early stage. And that's what's small scope. Middling scope, in the sense, the individual, the practitioner's mental state is capable to think a little bit further, not just immediate, not just today, not just this life, maybe a little bit able to think further than this life. And then the great scope is talking about not just he or she is able to think, able to work his or her own long term, but also able to think, work for the long term, the benefit of the many, many living creatures. And that's what the label is given in the small, middling, and the great scope. So our reading is in the great scope, in the great scope. And the great scope section start with the topic cultivation of bodhicitta, which I mentioned earlier. And that is really cultivation of that mental state, the altruistic awakened mind, is the cornerstone for the people who want to practice bodhisattva and the teachings. If that mental state is not nurtured, then it is very, very difficult to say, yes, I am following bodhisattva and the teachings, or I am Mayanist. Tsongkhapa said, not in this text, his extensive text, your practice will not become Mahayana practice because simply you are reading the Mahayana texts, or you have a Mahayana teachers, or you are in a Mahayana environment. Your practice will become only mindfulness practice when your practice is, influenced by the bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So that is really important. So the great scope section start from that cultivation of bodhicitta, and that is really, the cultivation of bodhicitta, which briefly I'm going to touch on. There are, from Indian tradition, there are two methods. Many of you know, we already read the section. Just to refresh, there are two methods. Both are very, very effective. The method which is called 7-point cause and effect. There are 7 stages. The earliest are the causes. Earliest stages are the causes. Later stages are the result. Therefore, the technique is called 7-point cause and effect. Mainly, the whole stages are designed to enhance initially loving kindness, compassion, and based on loving kindness and compassion, then bring the altruistic awakened mind, bodhicitta. And there are several, the Indian masters who use that technique to enhance their nurtured bodhicitta. The another technique, as you know, is, emphasized by this great 7th century Indian master, Shantideva, that is called, what you call the equalizing and exchanging oneself with others. Very, very useful technique. Whether we cultivate bodhicitta or not, that some of the points, some of the suggestions Shantideva had made in his Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, very, very helpful to face the day-to-day realities, challenges. Many of our daily difficulties, particularly mental difficulties, are directly or indirectly related to one of our unhealthy mental states, either very actively or in a very hidden or very sort of, in a hidden level, operate in a hidden level, that is the self-centered mind. I mean, we all say, I'm not self-centered person, but if we scratch the surface, we'll see that. So therefore, if we closely examine, if we closely analyze, many of our daily, the difficulties, stress, and all sorts of mental difficulties are related to that mental state. And that text, Shantideva's text, Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, has full of amazing suggestions, statements, how to deal with that mind. So that people even who are not interested in cultivation of bodhicitta, that text is still very, very useful. Very, very useful. Then of course, that text is very useful. People who are interested in cultivation of bodhicitta using this slightly different technique compared to the previous one, the 7-point cause and effect. This latter one is more sort of, the challenging, almost saying, some of the Tibetan teachers say, more or less saying, that technique shakes you up, and so very, very useful. So there are these techniques, and for us, when I say for us, I'm talking about my own mental state and my own situation, my own status. Not using some of these amazing, readily available, for a long time, many great teachers have applied, they suggested to use, saying useful, helpful, not using it, not applying it, is one of the main reasons why the bodhicitta is not nurturing, within ourselves. And then if we trace back a little bit, I'm talking about myself, although whole my lives, I can say whole, but my sort of whole my adult lives, I have said this word bodhicitta maybe 100 times a day, but then still not haven't tasted the essence of having that mind. So not having tasted properly, therefore there's no enthusiasm wanting to have it, wanting to develop. And that is really, really, I'm talking about myself, wasted this human existence. And so that, the very, very useful, try to understand that many years ago, one time I sat in one of this kind of gathering, in Tibetan we have this nice expression, which I thought is very, very true, Again, I'm talking about my own experience, my own situation. I will say first in Tibetan, then I will explain you in English. Before 1959, the Tibetans, the main sort of income, or what you can say GDP, is nomads, the butter, what you call the meat, what you call the cheese. Those are the main, the income source. And butters are transported from the nomad land to those small towns, and although it's not that hot like in India, but during the summer it gets hot. So how they transport? They transport, butters put into the what you call the leather, the packet by leather. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah. So many different shapes and sizes. Some are round, some are square, some are big, some are small, and in that way, from the nomad land, they transport to the towns and villages, and they sell. So that is the background. So this is the expression. Go with that. That outside the outside, the leather, the skin, not leather, the skin, yak skin, animal skin, is still completely dry. There's no trace of butter outside. Inside is butter. That butter has been there, some cases, year. Not just month, not just week, year. But outside the skin, there's no sign of any butter coming out. It's still completely dry. So that expression is used to say that, chote chojimago. That means if you're constantly hearing bodhicitta, 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 eventually your mind will get used to that, then say, oh yeah, that is bodhicitta. But there's no real taste of bodhicitta. although whole your life be heard that expression and have heard many blah 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 on that, but if we don't put the really inner stand and don't work step by step, it will like that skin inside the butter, very rich, very sort of, very rich, but outside it's completely dry. See, that's the expression. May end up in that way. So, that was one of the earlier my gathering, one of the FPT classes. I said that, and then after the class and the tea break, I can't remember who was that. Somebody. Geshe, can you repeat that expression again? That's a really interesting expression. I remember that very clearly. And another similar to that, another expression is used. The stones that are under the ocean for thousands of years, but if you bring out and if you break it, it's still dry. Inside it's still dry. No trace of water inside the stone. Although that stone has been under the water, the depth of the ocean for thousands of years. So that is here, there's that kind of risk. Keep hearing, then if you just, doing that, then eventually it will become, that's a normal, we heard that, bodhicitta. So why I'm saying that is working, really step by step, using some of these well-established techniques is very, very crucial, very, very crucial. And the people who are interested to nurture this mind. And so that is the thing. After nurturing these, this mind, either the one of those techniques, then the practitioners or the followers to take that mental state, take the bodhicitta into further step, into further sort of nurturing further and deeper. Then again, these great Indian masters, including Buddha himself, taught some of these techniques, some of these what's called practices, traditionally called the 6 perfections. 6 perfections. 6 perfections are taught purely to design to enhance that mind. The mind which is cultivated using some of those techniques, but still it has to go further. It has to deepen further. And how that mind is deepened further, then application of such as the 6 perfections, practicing generosity, ethics, patience, the joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. Applying these, to deepening the altruistic awakened mind. Therefore, there are these teachings. So our section that we are reading now is the last one out of the 6 perfections. The last one, that is the wisdom, the perfection of wisdom. The wisdom. So that is now we are approaching here. Now the wisdom is very general term, and here a particular wisdom is taught. Among the wisdom, such as wisdom realizing impermanence, nature of impermanence, wisdom realizing nature of life, wisdom realizing nature of dukkha, and so forth. But here the wisdom that among the 6 perfection, the last perfection, which is called perfection of wisdom, It is a particular wisdom, that is called wisdom realizing emptiness. And our topic reading section is in that section. Now, if you pick up that copy that you have, what I'm going to do tonight, as I mentioned earlier, just to take you up to the present reading. Then we'll have, if there are questions, we'll have questions. And what I'm going to do here, have you got that one? Yeah. So the first outline here, it says general setup of conditions. Have you got that outline? Is it there? Yeah. May I have slide? Condition necessary for transcendent insight. Is it there? Yeah. So that's the first, the major outlines. So here, what Tsongkhapa has done. Here, what Tsongkhapa has done, and this is also the similar structure. The previous topic. The previous topic was shamatha. This is vipassana. The previous topic prior to this, the topic was shamatha. Now the present, this one is vipassana. Vipassana is, as you know, the Sanskrit term. It is a very general term. There are many different types of vipassana, as I just mentioned earlier. I use English. There are many different types of wisdom. And here is really more or less, that is the section. So what Tsongkhapa has done here under this saying, the conditions necessary for transcendent insight. In other words, to cultivate proper wisdom realizing emptiness. Cultivate wisdom realizing emptiness. The individuals need to create the conditions, mental conditions, the mental conditions to have that, to experience that wisdom, wisdom realizing emptiness. And what he has done in here, under that general outline, he divided two sections, saying the general condition and a specific condition for this. So I will not read one by one, but under the general condition, if you look at the first page in that section, he gave some important points. First of all, he said, to cultivate this kind of wisdom realizing emptiness, individual must make very rich his or her mental faculty on the subject, on the topic, through listening, through contemplation, through meditation. Meditation in the sense, what you have contemplated, what you have heard, what you have contemplated, then bring that into our mind again and again and again. Familiarize, that in that sense, the meditation. And that is what you can see in the first part of this condition, necessary condition. And also he talked about it is useful to have some of those great treatises, teachings that guide you, that give you the direction, that give you the direction what to do, to understand what is that wisdom realizing emptiness. And here he talked about, like in the second paragraph, one must seek such a view by relying on teachings of the definitive meaning, not on the doors of interpretable meaning. So in other words, some of those, the Nagarjuna's teachings, like, the fundamental wisdom, and his other teachings, or the Ayadev's teachings, 400 verses. Some of those teachings should be, studied. Should be, and those you will see that, in the next page. So I will not go one by one. If you look at that, all the next few paragraphs. Then if you turn your page into 132, in that number you can see, I think it's the same number, 132, there's an outline, the method of determining the view. Now this is also still under the heading of, the condition necessary to cultivate wisdom, realizing emptiness. So now here what Geshe has explained, and this is important one. If you look at heading, the method of determining the view. Under that, then what sub like a outline, identification of afflictional misknowledge. This is a little bit, I don't know how to, whether it's proper English or not, I don't know. So what it's talking about here, it's a really important one. Why? The main point here, Geshe has made, why individuals need wisdom. Wisdom realizing emptiness. Why? And the answer is given in here, why we need wisdom realizing emptiness, that kind of wisdom, because we want to be free from dukkha and the origins of dukkha, suffering and origins of suffering. Particularly here is origins of suffering. Now if we trace back where the sufferings are coming from, then the Buddhist master, including Buddha, they all trace back to what is called fundamental misunderstanding of the reality, or the affliction, fundamental affliction. Affliction in the sense misunderstanding. When you say affliction, when you say affliction in the Buddhist case, the Buddhist understanding of affliction is misunderstanding the reality. Of course, it has many different degrees. If we misunderstand, which quite often, when in the Tibetan case, quite often, if you misunderstand which is sugar and which is salt, so instead of putting sugar, you may put salt in your tea, so your tea will be very salty. That's also a misunderstanding. Different layers of misunderstanding. And here, what we are talking about is, quite often the term is used, fundamental reality, misunderstanding relations to the fundamental reality of the things and events. That is a very, very big word. What does that mean? What's that to do with my daily lives? Fundamental misunderstanding of the reality of the things and events. But if we again hear the Buddhist masters very talked about that, but then slowly narrow down into very close to ourselves. Fundamental misunderstanding of who we are. And that is, here we are talking about affliction, fundamental affliction, the affliction or the misunderstanding, the misunderstanding of our identity, I, self, the manner or the nature of our identity. So that is here is really important. And in this section, really Geshe gave us why wisdom is necessary to be cultivated because we want to deal with the root of the suffering. And the root of the suffering, among many different causes and conditions, but the root of the suffering is this, fundamental affliction or fundamental, the misunderstanding of the, in this case, nature of the I, nature of our identity, self, and that is what here. To really to get rid of or uproot that fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of ourself or our identity, without that wisdom to really to correct that misunderstanding, it's never going to be, we are never going to be free from that understanding. That misunderstanding nature of the reality, in this case, reality of the self, the I, is only to be solved, to be overcome when we have the wisdom to understand the way in which the I or the self exists, the manner of the existence of I, manner of the existence of self is understood as it is, then this affliction, the fundamental wisdom, fundamental affliction or the misunderstanding will be removed, will be get rid of, which is the root of the suffering. And that's what here these sections are explained. And as you can see, and then next page 133, what Je Tsongkhapa has done, gave sources from the great Indian master like Nagarjuna, Chandakirti, Aryadev, and so on and so forth. And very, very useful to tracing back to some of those great Indian masters. And then it follows further explanation how we misunderstand, how our mind misunderstands, the nature of I, nature of our identity. Our identity, our self, that is I, our identity, who we are, what we are, is 100% dependent on this mind and body, which are transitory nature, which are momentarily changing nature, the mind and body, the five aggregates. But our concept of the I, the self, which is heavily dependent on this, is a very, very different concept, very, very different belief. The concept of our I, concept of our identity that we have is very much there's some kind of static, some kind of unchanging, the I or the self, which is heavily 100% dependent on this transitory nature of the mind and body. And if we look at in that kind of connection, then we'll quite quickly we will see, we will sort of start to have a the doubt how it is possible. My concept of I, of the self, the I, which is heavily dependent on this mind and body, which are transitory nature. But my concept of I is very, like a immortal, like a unchanging, like a very unitary. Where it is dependent on the base is very multiple, very transitory, very changing nature. Immediately the puzzle will come. And here that what he had explained in those things in the coming pages, and very useful to look at. We have read all those things. I will not go, again and again. Then also, among those misunderstandings, among those afflictions, some are developed during this lifetime, encountering different cultures, encountering different belief systems, encountering different philosophical systems. Some of these misunderstanding relation to our nature of relation to our sense of I, our identity, may have like a born with us. And in the Buddhist understanding is called innate misunderstanding. Innate in the sense not developed while encountering different cultures, but there when we are born. And it's called innate grasping, self-grasping. And some other through the encountering different cultures, so on and so forth. Those afflictions are called contrived afflictions. Again, in the Buddhist teachings, to look at which one is more serious, which one is more destructive, innate one or contrived one. That misunderstanding relation to our sense of identity that we have due to encountering particular culture, particular belief system in this lifetime is more damaging to our future, or that misunderstanding that we have relation to our sense of identity, which is born with us, innate, born with us due to for many lifetimes going through that. Which one is more serious? And it here also dealt with that. And the next page, like page 136, 137, all goes through that. Okay, now I'm going to go a little bit further. Otherwise we will not. Then if you look at page 140, here the thing, reason for the need to seek the view that understands selflessness, wishing to abandon such misknowledge or misunderstanding. So this, if we, when we understand, through the analysis, through the contemplation, when we understand, my pain, difficulties, shortcomings, of course some of them are quite gross, but in the deep down, they are coming from some of my way of believing, some of them my way of thinking, some of them my way of perception. Now then, what to do with them? How to deal with them? If that's when we understand, many of our shortcomings are, arising, sort of coming from some of those our mental states, due to some of those mistaken mental states. Then, how can I handle with them? How can I deal with them? That's the very natural question that and this is what here the Geshe has dealt with that. Reason for that, why we look at, and then there are some sutra quotations which are quite useful, particularly people who follow the teachings of the Buddha. And there's one nice quotation in the middle of that great Indian master Dhammakirti, as I mentioned earlier, this great logician. there's a nice quotation in there too from him. So that is that section that follows page 140, 41, and then it continues up to page 144. 44. Now then page 144, after that, then what we have here is, in fact, from up to here, I should say this, up to here is really what Je Tsongkhapa has done, that the first outline that we saw right at the beginning of this, saying the conditions necessary for transcendent insight. In other words, prerequisite, the sort of things to individuals to cultivate wisdom, realizing emptiness. All these are prerequisite, or the conditions necessary, to have the wisdom, realizing emptiness. So here, up to here, what we have seen is really talk about, the general condition, general sort of prerequisite, have the good information, rich, make oneself very rich, information, have rich with information on the topic, contemplate with them, familiarize with them, and also rely on some of those great teachers, follow some of their guidance, and so on and so forth. That's the general, the prerequisite to have this wisdom. And the specific prerequisite is really to understand how that, how we perceive our identity, I, or the self. Is there any mistaken element, when we perceive, when we experience, when we think, when we believe, when we experience I, or the self, and so on and so forth. And here the Je Tsongkhapa, following some of those great Indian masters, saying there is a great length of, or depth of misunderstandings, within us, relation to, in general, all things and events, in particular in this context, relation to ourself, our identity. And that understanding that misunderstanding of the reality of the self or the I is the most important prerequisite to understand, to develop wisdom, realizing emptiness. And that is what really more or less like a summary up to here. It is like this. Say the crime detector want to find out the guilty person. If he or she has, detector has a good picture of that guilty person, easy to be catched. If he or she has no clue, the height, the gender, the skin color, have no clue, very, very difficult to catch, isn't it? It is exactly the same in here. If the individual understands how we make mistakes, relation to the things and events as a general, and particularly relation to our sense of identity, ourself, or the I, wisdom can be developed quite easily. If we have no clue how we make mistakes, relation to how we perceive our I or the self or the identity, very, very difficult to have the wisdom to be cultivated. And that is what, up to here is this. Now, from here, then really, it says a general, actual generation of the two views in order, determination of the personal selflessness So here, really, then Tsongkhapa moves on to explain the emptiness, the emptiness of self and emptiness of, other than the self. The emptiness of the individual, selflessness of the person, and selflessness of the phenomena. That is normally that we use the term in terms of the term. Selflessness of the person, selflessness of the phenomena. I will just say a few words on relation to that, then I will leave it. It might be too much blah blah. Now, why this selflessness of the person and selflessness of the phenomena? It is very psychologically, it is very, very nice. Very, very nice to look at how these teachers are clever to summarize all mistakes into two categories. All mistakes that we have and bring lots of pain and difficulties, put into these two categories. Saying the self-grasping of person and self-grasping of phenomena. In other words, our mistaken mind relation to the individuals and our mistaken mind relation to other than the individuals. That includes everything, including universal. Universal. So that is very, and wisdom is called selflessness. Wisdom realizing selflessness of the person, and wisdom realizing selflessness of the phenomena, because there are two mistakens and there are two wisdoms. Okay, I'll leave it here. Would you like to have one or two questions? Any would like to have questions, or not really? It's up to you. Okay, yeah.
Could I try one? It's a bit naughty because it's trying to draw.
Yeah, on. Yeah.
It's trying to draw the links between bodhicitta and your metaphor of the butter in these sacks or leather, whatever they were.
Yes.
And you say bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta over and over and over again. Now, a cheap response, so this is where I'm a bit shy about saying it, because a cheap response is, haha, that sounds like perfect nominalism. So in the other course, it sounds like perfect nominalism. So you're just producing a name, and yeah, okay, these things are just labels, and that's all we need to know. So I'm sorry to other people who are not here, but in this other course that we're doing it, we're being asked to think about all these different kinds of emptiness, and one of them is that ultimately it's all just nominal. It's about names.
Oh, yes.
And really nothing else except the dependency between the names and other things. And so I was sort of, as you went along, I was trying to think of what would be the arguments against such a cheap feeling that really thinking about bodhicitta by just looking at the way it relates to other concepts might be the right way of...
I will give you another example. I was told by one of my friends recently while I was in India. One of my friends, my classmates, who now lives in America and working in the elderly people's home. And he said, I said, isn't it too hard to work there? Some days, sometimes 7 days a week, constantly seeing people struggling their life, aging, sickness. He said, yeah, it was extremely hard the first few months. After that, get used to. That's what it here. What I'm talking about, cheap in that sense. So you are more sensitized. So this, when we talk about bodhicitta, it's nice, it's very good mind to be cultivated, and then keep hearing, oh yeah. You are completely sensitized. So you don't get it. Yes, nominal, that is in certain case, yes. But if you analyze what is there as a bodhicitta, other than that experiencing that mind itself, it is just, there's nothing. It is In that sense, it is nominal. But it is an experience. It is not just a word. It is not just a label. There's an experience go with that. And then as long as if we leave it, if we just leave it, not to have that experience, then, I mean, this desensitize, isn't it? That is the word, yeah. Eventually you desensitize, then it becomes very norm. Then never try to experience it. That is this Tibetan expression. Yeah.
Hi, Geshe. Welcome back. Geshe, I just wanted to ask, obviously you just touched a little bit on the selflessness of self and person, and the text explain a little bit probably which one is to develop first. So I was just thinking if you have time to say which one first and why.
So I mean, more in an experiential level, I really don't know. But following the text, like particularly Geshe Tashi very clearly said, the understanding of selflessness of the person arises first, or occurs first, then follow this understanding of the selflessness of the phenomena later. And it has a explanation is very much based on more experiential level. What they said, I think Geshe Tashi and also another Tibetan teacher have said, because the people who seek liberation, the core in there is the I. I am in the samsara. I want to be liberated. So I is in the central. So to look at where the mistaking is made, relation to the I, always come first, not the mistake made with the body or the other things. They come second. So that is what they talk about. And upon that is answer is very experiential answer, not theoretical. It is very experiential because I, as a liberation seeker, that I comes at the middle, central piece. So then, really, it is important to understand the nature of the I. It comes always first. Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it here. Yeah. So now the end of is the conclusion. Conclusion, as you know, we'll do praises to 21 Tara, and then some short dedications. Om Je Tse Ma Pama Doma La Cha Tse Lo Chanza Doma Nyu Ma Pa Ma Jene Ge Je Lo Dan Da Ma Jigden Som Guen Che Je She Je Kesa Je Wa Le Ne Jo Ma Chanza Dongge Da Wa Guen Do Kawa Jene Zik Be She Ma Kama Dong Da Tsoba Nam Je Rabdo Che We Ram Pa Ma Chanze Sengwe Chone Je Peme Chane Nambara Je Ma Jimba Zundu Kado She Wa Soba Samden Ju Nye Ma Chanze De Shin Shebe Zo Do Tae Nambara Jawa Je Ma Malu Paro Jimba Tobe Jawe Seji Shindu Tema Chanze Doda Rahon Yege Doda Choda Namga Kama Jigden Dombo Shabdi Nende Luba Meba Guba Nema Chanze Jajin Mela Samba Nula Naso Wanju Chema Chombo Rola Tisa Namda Nujun Soji Dune Tema Chanze Deje Chadan Peje Paro Togo Rabdo Joma Egon Yenjan Shabdi Nende Meba Toba Shindo Barma Chanze Dure Jiba Chembo Duje Bao Nambara Joma Chuje Shene Tonye Denze Dao Tamje Malu Sema Chanze Kunjo Sumzen Chaje Seme Toga Nambara Jema Malu choje kolo jembe, rangi oje tsonama chuma, chanze rabdo kawa jembe, oje oje chenwa pema, shiba rabshe tuta rai, dudan jikden wangdu zema, chanze sashi chongwe tsona, tamje guba numa nyema, chonye yewa yige honge, pongpa tamje nambara chuma, chanze tawe dumbu oje, Gyamba tamje shindo pam, rebe chene waba mele, tabare shindo wero zema, chanze kebe tama meta, barwe chenwe une nema, eja yungum kune koke, tae pune nambara choma, chanze sashi ngola chake, teji nujin shabdi doma, chonye jenze yike honge, rinpa tumbo namni kema, chanze tema kema shema, nyangen deshin chu nyema, sowa omda yanda tembe, tikpa chenpo chompa nyema, chanze kune korwa kawe, trae lune nambara kema, ike chube ngane kwebe, rikpa hongle choma nyema, chanze ture shamni dabe, honge nambe sabe nyema, re ra menda radang beje, jikden somna yewa nyema, chanze laye tsoye nambe, re da tajen chana nama, tara nyeju pege yege, duna malu bane sema, chanze laye tsonam gebo, lada mem ji dema, gune goja gawa jeje, zeda melwa ngenpa sema, chanze nima dawa jebe, jinyi bola wero sema, hara nyeju duda raye, shindo chakpe rimne sema, chanze tinyi sumnam gobe, shiwe toda yangda dema, duda rongla nujun sona, chompa ture rapcho nyema, tsawe ngaji dupa deda, chanze wane nyeju zaj. Dedication in the last page. Chanjo sem cho rembo che ma je pa nama je juru che je ba nya ba me ba ya ko ne kondo pewa tobze changshin chamgun jawe de zenjon pewe kunse toboro zen chosom gowe lengme tojo ba dasa deje gando shade sho kare rave korve shingam de pendan dewa malu jongwe ne chenre sewa tenzin jazo ye shabe sede pado tenjo. Oh yeah, thank you.